So hi everyone, my name is G and I'm joined by my co-host Simon. Hey Simon,
Hey, how you doing?
all good. And today we're here to talk about the new Dolby Atmos internal renderer in Pro Tools and find out how a couple of independent mixers are using it within their workflow for music and for post-production. So today we have two guests, which I'm really excited to get talking. First of all, Mike Tucci, who's worked with Wu-Tang Clan, Kanye, Ty Dolla $ign, Chris Brown, and also his own band Unstoppable Death Machine. So I'm super excited to be chatting with Mike Tucci today. As well as that, we have Jonny Ill Sounds, who's a freelancer who's done work with Netflix, Amazon Prime, HBO, Vice Network, and Kevin Hart's Heartbeat Productions as well. So I'm super excited to be chatting with both of these guests today. So thank you guys for coming on today. First of all, Mike, how you doing today?
Hey G, I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited. You can see I've got energy. I'm ready for the chat today. That's going to be
No
great.
doubt.
Jonny, welcome. How you doing?
Good, man. Thank you. How you
Good,
guys
good.
doing?
Good. Simon, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Happy to be here.
Good,
So,
good.
one of the things like when we've done Atmos live streams before, quite often over the years, we always start with a little bit of background about what Atmos is. I don't think we need to do that anymore. I think it's just such a part of the landscape now. So we thought maybe instead of kind of getting into the whole what is Atmos thing, it might be useful to ask both of our guests, whether we've got them here, what is going on in the world of Atmos for music, what's going on in the world of Atmos for post, like a kind of a bit of an Atmos state of the nation um, kind of question. So maybe we start with you, Mike. What's happening with Atmos for music right now?
Yeah. Atmos for music is, more prevalent today than it was, even a year ago, I think. There's a large push to have new music mixed in Atmos and also pre-existing, older music remixed and reformatted for Atmos as well. Yeah, it's been spending a good amount of time working on, songs in that format. And I think it's less of a mystery, like you said, now, as opposed to, a year or even 2 years before. But at the same time, I still think some people are still catching on to it. So there's still room to grow and, it's still evolving and developing. Atmos as a format is in a pretty good place right now, I think.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely getting easier. That's part of why we're here is to talk about how it's getting easier to get into it as well. So we'll definitely jump in on that. But yeah, Jonny, how about you? So obviously Atmos is probably a bit more established in sort of post and sound for picture, but yeah, how's things for you right now?
Things are good, man. Like Mike said, it's become more prevalent. Um, and with the internal render, it's actually given a lot of access to guys who don't have, like freelancers like me, who actually don't have an Atmos studio to work out of. The binaural renderer and being able to do it on headphones and then going into a post facility or a soundstage and then finishing your project there. It offers great flexibility as far as uh, what's being delivered. It's still a lot of 5.1,
Mhm.
but guys are mixing in Atmos because eventually that's gonna be the thing. A lot of theaters are Atmos, like, so if you go to like an AMC or a Cinemark or whatever, like it's your film is gonna be in Atmos. But for home, which is a lot of what I do, is like home movies and things that stream, they still want it delivered in Atmos, but they're using my 5.1 stream. So the renderer is great because you can basically do your Atmos mix and then just stem it out, and then the stems just down mixes, and then you just print your stems.
So you're using it as a master format, even if that's not the primary delivery medium, right? So
Yeah, that's how I use it. Yeah.
yeah, actually, I'm curious. I'm guessing it's not quite like that for music, Mike. Is that right? Is it still a separate sort of stereo mix and Atmos mix, or are people starting to kind of go for a mix once sort of approach?
No, I think right now it's mix and master and stereo, and then Atmos is treated as a secondary process to it. Um, but most playback systems, if they can't do a 714 Atmos output, they'll sum it down to like a 5.1. and then, you know, Apple will do the binaural on the headphones. So I think the process is a little bit of a two-step process, which I think is good, because the way I see Atmos, I see it as another format. The same way, you know, back in the day, if you had a tape reel, you take the tape reel and put it onto a lacquer, or even if you had a file, you'd put it onto a CD, and those were the listening formats. And Atmos to me is analogous to a different format that represents the original intent of the production of the song. I think it's sort of like a separate process, at least in my experience and the way I treat it.
Yeah, I think that's common to what we're hearing, you know, from lots of people. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, I'm like super curious to learn about your setups, how you're working independently. I'm obviously really curious to hear about some of the projects you're working on and your backgrounds. But before we get into that, I was hoping we could I wanted to find out how it was you were working kind of before Atmos got brought into Pro Tools with the internal rendering process. So what were you guys doing before that? Was it a kind of a different kind of separate machines type situation?
It wasn't a separate machine. It was all on one machine, but two programs. You know, I'd run it Pro Tools out to the Dolby Atmos renderer program through the Dolby bridge, and I would output audio from the renderer to my speakers. But now with the internal renderer, you could do it all within Pro Tools. There's no need for a secondary application or any kind of secondary routing. It's all just in the IO tab right now. So that's the main difference. Just, you know, single computer, two programs. Now it's just all in one place.
Is that kind of the same for you, Jonny?
Exactly the same. Yep.
It's actually quite remarkable how far it's come, though, that you can now just have everything in your laptop and your headphones or whatever and take it with you to anything. Do you just question, like, when you've had an Atmos mix with the internal renderer, have you taken it to any other place, Jonny? Like you said that you take it to a soundstage or somewhere or another studio. Is that like a regular like thing for you as well?
Not the ADM. I usually take my 5.1 stems because that's what I'm usually delivering is the 5.1.
Right. So you're pretty much start to finish, your Atmos mix is getting done at your place.
Right. So yeah, and usually, like I said, like when I go to a soundstage, that's like the final thing, and I'm with the producer, I'm with the director, and sometimes the main editor, and whatever the rest of the post team that needs to be in session for the final mix pass is how I use it.
Nice.
Awesome.
So the great thing is because I've started in Atmos, if later down the line they're like, hey, can you upmix this? It's already done. So that's why I was like, you know, I wanted to be an early adapter of the technology. And originally one of the reasons why like I reached out to Mike, because he was one of the first people I knew using Atmos, especially on the music side. So
you said you were an early adopter. I just wondered what project, was there a specific project that you thought, let's do this in Atmos, or how did you get started in it?
I think it was probably Virginality was the first one I did, starring Bria Henderson, and she also wrote and starred in it. She's one of the actors from the show The Good Doctor. Yeah. So I mixed hers in Atmos, and then ended up delivering it in 5.1 because that's what the festivals wanted. So
I wanted to just touch on some history behind how you got into Atmos. So Mike, I actually didn't mention, but you've obviously got a huge list of tracks that you've mastered. You know, like you're known as like mastering engineer. How come you got into Atmos, and like what was the main reason that you got into Atmos? Like, when was the first kind of call you may have had about Atmos, and what made you go, actually, now I want to look into this?
Yeah, I think, it was just a matter of necessity, really.
Mhm.
Clients were asking about it, inquiring about it, and I think I got enough inquiries to the point where I said, I need to, jump into it.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of hesitation from some people,
Mhm.
and I think it was equally met with enthusiasm from some people. And so there was like a little while where I was just kind of like seeing where the cards fell. But the first thing I did in Atmos, it was a song called Zeke. It was I think the artist is Cheska. It was for a label under Universal. Um and then I started just, getting more acquainted. I remember that mix I used, it was all objects, and it was all, I think I used almost all 128 objects or something.
Wow.
I just, it was the first, thing I did, and I hadn't developed my workflow, which is more of an object bed workflow at this point. Um, so yeah, the first mix was kind of crazy because I just didn't know, much about it. I was just kind of, becoming acquainted. Um, but yeah, in the last couple of years, it's, grown, the format has grown, the demand has grown, and I developed a workflow into it. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really pushed me into Atmos was a company called Sing, which are these speakers behind me. They I met the CEO, Christopher Stringer, and we got along pretty well. And I expressed my interest in, the other part about the Atmos thing was, well, what's your setup gonna be? Tuning the room, that was a whole, the logistics behind it was a lot to wrap my head around. And I was kind of like also waiting to see what would be the best, speaker setup and monitoring setup, etc. And it turned out that Sing kind of pushed me, forward, because their speakers sounded good, they were easy to set up, and it just seemed like it just made things kind of simple in my mind.
Mhm.
And once you have it all set up in the room, it's, the next step. Pro Tools is, I'm pretty familiar with Pro Tools. It was just a matter of the routing and the organization of, tracks, and the rendering of the ADM, the specifications for the labels, etc. And then also the binaural fold down was another aspect of nailing down, like, how do you get the mix to sound good in a room, but also sound good coming out of headphones.
Yeah.
Because where most people are really listening or consuming an Atmos mix at this point, there's different, Bluetooth speaker situations and stuff like that. But for the most part, listeners are hearing an Atmos mix binaurally on headphones. So, all of that was, the beginning stages of kind of, getting acquainted with the new tech and the new format. So yeah, going from that first mix to, like, the mix I did last week, or even recently, it was the Wu-Tang Clan 36 Chambers. That was like the 2 years of doing Atmos mixing prepared me for that album, I think, because that album was completely off the wall. The RZA gave me free range to do whatever I wanted, and there's a lot of panning and stuff that I really don't normally do in other mixes, because the aim for an Atmos mix to me is to represent the stereo mix faithfully, but also just spatialize it. And the 36 Chambers album, there's a lot of vocal panning, a lot of movement. Old Dirty Bastard is running across the room and stuff. So the beginning phases of mixing was very static, where you have elements of the mix stationed in one side of the room, front, back, whatever. And up until like last week, it's a little bit more complex with the panning and stuff. But yeah, the journey's been interesting. It's gone from kind of intimidating and and it's become pretty familiar, which is cool.
Yeah, and I know that you've obviously been doing it for a while because we did a video together where you're showing how to set up the Dolby, the render and everything, before the internal renderer, which is interesting. But I just wanted to touch on like kind of the internal renderer there as well. Like obviously you're using it now as well. Like um, I'm guessing it's like less time consuming now. Obviously you have the internal renderer that you could just kind of go straight into it, right? Everything is set and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, especially, if you're a mixer who's already doing a mix in Pro Tools, it's just a lot easier to now just, take what your tracks right there instead of stemming out your mix, you can just go create your outputs and turn them into objects without, redoing your IO for a separate application using the Dolby bridge. So in that sense, and I do mastering, like you said. So for a mixer who's already working in I don't use Pro Tools to master, but if you're a mixer doing a mix and someone says we need an Atmos mix, now the internal renderer is really literally just a click of a button and you're pretty much ready to go.
That's amazing. And how much of your own work like that you're mastering that you do for Atmos? Is there any kind of specific songs that you've done? Kind of you did the master, then you got told actually we're doing an Atmos mix as well, then you have to put in the process and do the Atmos mix. Does that happen quite rarely or?
Yeah, it happens a lot actually.
Yeah.
And I think Atmos at this point is analogous to a mastering process as well. Where the mix more or less is done in stereo, and either I'll get the stems from the mixer and just kind of match the balance, match the impact that the stereo master has, and just create an Atmos mix from the stems that are provided. I would say it's like a 50-50 kind of a situation where I do the mastering and then I get the stems to do the Atmos mix and master. Yeah, I think it's pretty even load at this point.
Really interesting. No, I love that. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. So, Jonny, I'd love to hear from you as well, man, about your history behind Atmos. Also, I know Mike touched on his speaker system. I'd love to know kind of how your setup is as well.
Yeah, man. I got into it because I was actually doing game audio and with a company called Rocket Sound here in North Hollywood. And this was like when Atmos really first started taking off, or really came out, because before that it was like what was it? Sony had a immersive thing that they were doing, and a lot of it was like a 360 immersive system that they had. And I remember the studio I was at, like they switched to Atmos, and that's when I first got my first like little taste of it, and I was like, this is cool. Because I totally saw it as the future, because I was like, wow, it's like you're in the game, like everything that's happening around you, from the footsteps running, like from the character running to, if it's a first person shooter, missiles flying past you, like it was like you're there. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to translate to home, but at the time I was like, this is the coolest thing I ever heard. And so that's when I was like, yo, I gotta figure out how I can incorporate this into what I'm doing. And so then when Atmos came along, I initially got the like Waves NX head tracker, and I was just using a headphone thing, and that's how I got into it.
I mean, even the game, like just touching back on games, like even when I'm playing like Oculus or something and just being in there, like how like that immersive experience, and it's just amazing. No, thank you. And your setup there, Jonny, as well, you said, in your room.
My 5.1 is, I have Atom A7V, or yeah, the A7V, the latest ones that Atom came out with. But The studios I worked at before the pandemic, I was at a studio called Soundworks here in Burbank, and the majority of the stuff they do is like Disney, Pixar, cartoon, a lot of cartoon animation and video game stuff. But I was at one of their remote locations, and they shut down uh at the pandemic, and then that's when I had my own setup, but I was like, all right, I need to get in and build my own at least a 5.1, and that's how I got started with my 5.1 system. So the and the reason I brought up that studio is they have an Atom system there. So and I knew the sound of the Atom, so that's the reason I went with them. And then for my stereo mains, it's a independent company. They're called Soul Asylum Acoustic Design, and the SA25Ms are what I have. They're they're a four-way monitor. They're a lot like the Barefoots. They're very similar to the Barefoots. So yeah, that's my system now. But once I get, I'm waiting for my updated drivers, because my SAS acoustics have a they've got this uh when they've got a threshold, essentially, like, you know how like some subs have a threshold, like you got to hit a certain level before it'll kick on. These have that, so I'm waiting for a this update so that it removes that, because I can't edit backgrounds because they're too low.
Right.
Oh, right.
For the threshold. So unfortunately, like I'm only using my Atoms right now for that. But for music, whenever I do a music mix or master, like I use those.
Yeah.
Because I can get the volume that I need. But for film, like it's right now, just right now, because they're very great. I really like them. It's just I gotta I gotta get that, and then eventually I'll probably end up getting another one for a center channel, and then maybe moving these and putting them up. I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that, you don't have to have a kind of carbon copy system of, everyone, you can actually work independently in Atmos without having necessarily, like, 16 speakers and super high ceiling and all that stuff. It's like you said, most people are going to be experiencing it on a headphones or a domestic system, right?
Exactly. So for my headphones, right now I'm using these Allo Audio S5Xs, and they're actually made for Atmos mixing in headphones.
Wow.
And they're pretty flat, and they've got a decent sound stage, enough to where um things translate well. So I've been happy with them, and the stuff that I've delivered through them, clients are happy. So I've got no complaints there.
Nice one. So, and have you also kind of developed a system for working with Atmos now, like a template or a kind of an approach that you take?
It depends on the product. So for for smaller, like shorter projects, like shorts, yeah, I've got a couple different templates. So if it's heavy in the effects, in sound effects, then I've got one that's a little more for object based things. And if it's like, say, like a drama or something where there's not a lot of motion and things are static, then I'm just using beds.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, I guess it's a hybrid format, so you can approach it in different ways. I know I can see you've got a project up and running there behind you. I wonder if maybe you could show us what's going on in that session.
Yeah, sure. In this session, it's a scene from a student film called Traveler of the East, or Traveler from the East, I believe. And this is something like I upmixed, and essentially you can see like I've got uh, objects here for this thing called the Gorgon, which is a dragon,
Hmm.
and um, and it essentially flies around the room and over the main character Edward, who goes through this portal and from our world into this fantasy world where it turns out he's like a, a prince who's got these supernatural powers. Essentially, this light is a fairy, and everything that she's doing is in front of you, and then to the side, and then to the back, and then let's see, down a hole
Wow.
goes, and then this is where things get interesting. So,
Wow.
um, I'll end up sending you the playback so you can actually hear it, but and then he lands here, and now he's in the fantasy world, and when he looks up, that's when the Gorgon first shows up and is flying around. You hear the wings flapping, you hear the echo of him being in this forest. It's a big space, which is another cool thing about the objects. Um, as things move, you can change the size of them so
Right.
that they expand as they get closer. So it's actually like you can almost feel the weight of whatever it is that you're of the object that is moving towards you or away from you, and you can automate that, which is what I've done. um, so then let's see, scroll through, and then Kane, which is like he's a demon type guy. um, and so he appears and shows up behind him and then disappears, kind of like a Nightcrawler from X-Men uh, situation there. And then he runs and falls and then gets knocked out, and that's the end of that scene. Um, but yeah.
It's actually so interesting that you're talking through it as well. Like, because I'm now, even though the sound's not right there, but it's like I can just feel like I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But now, like, even when I watch a movie now, I'm gonna keep picking up like, oh, this is where the. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's amazing. Even that bit there, like,
Yeah, so like when he's falling through this tunnel, it's like I've got a bunch of whooshes and like, oh, and that was another cool thing. So with the whooshes, because he's falling down, I started the sounds up top. And so they come down as he's going down, and once he hits the ground, the sounds are on the ground along with the bed of the with the uh with the backgrounds of like the sounds of the forest, like which would be a bed because those things are static, like I said. Um,
that's
but
all.
yeah.
Johnny, did you say you could pull up the internal render as well? Does it allow you
Yeah.
to do that?
So what I can do is I'll play it. Here, let me drag it over, and um, and I'll just start it from where the fairy shows up, and then you'll be able to see. You'll at least be able to see the motion.
Yeah.
Uh, there she is.
Wow.
There. Back. Pushed. So then this is where you see all the sounds going down, and then he lands. And then that's the Gorgon flying around. uh, So when he appears and disappears, there's like a kind of almost like a explosion, but not an explosion, like a mystical sound,
Mhm.
a mystical poof, or I don't know what to call it exactly, but yeah.
It's cool. Like G says, it's interesting that you're kind of describing how you want it to
Yeah.
be, and that you can actually make that happen with this format.
Yeah. So it's so you can get it, and that's why this is so fun, because it's like you can get really creative, and like it's like if you can think it, you can achieve it, kind of
Right.
thing. You know what I'm saying?
That's amazing. No, I appreciate that so much, Johnny. Really do. That's amazing.
So Mike, Johnny was talking about using the Waves NX headphone system. Have you got a system of anything like that for monitoring for music? Let's say for Apple Spatial.
Yeah, I use mostly the Apple AirPod Maxes to audition. Well, there's a few different ways to audition the binaural fold down for Apple. You can monitor the Dolby binaural straight out of Pro Tools. You can export an MP4 and monitor the MP4 through Apple AirPod Maxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another tool available that is the exact Apple encoding process for their spatial encoding. And that's basically called the Apple binaural renderer. It's just a droplet, kind of a plugin that you can pass through your multi-channel output, and it'll convert the multi into Apple's spatial binaural, like the real deal Apple. So there's multiple ways. It's either the Apple AirPod Maxes, and sometimes I hardwire them direct. And then I also have a pair of Odyssey headphones as well. But for me, it's really the speaker mix. That's the main thing that I focus on. How does it sound in the room? That's first and foremost the most important aspect for me. And the binaural, as long as it sounds good, as long as something isn't, jumping out or standing out of place, that's like secondary in my mind, at least. So, the most important aspect for an Atmos mix is the speaker playback for me. But the binaural is easy to monitor, it's just plug in your
Yeah, we've
phone.
got the there's like things like the Audio Movers plugin now, right? I don't know if you've tried
Yeah,
that.
that's the Apple binaural renderer. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that gives you the exact encoding that Apple uses.
Yeah.
Dolby binaural is what you're going to hear on Tidal, and I think also on Amazon. Apple has their own thing, and the Audio Movers plugin it's been confirmed by Apple that that's Apple's binaural spatial.
Right. Nice one. Is there anything similar to that in post and TV, Johnny? Like with do you have to listen? Are there any ways to monitor what it's going to sound like on a Netflix or some other kind of streaming service?
Nah, we don't have we don't have that. So the only like Mike said, I monitor through just the binaural, um, through my Matrix Studio.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a set, just where I press a button and that's what it's for. No, we don't. Unfortunately, we don't have something like that for that. But see, that's what I where I think streaming platforms aren't technically, or at least film streaming platforms aren't there yet, because we don't have that. So we've got a set um spec that we have to hit, but that's it. And then each stem, all the stems have to hit a particular spec as well. And as long as you're in compliance, like it goes through QC, and then QC let you know whether or not you're hitting spec or not. And so that's really what it's all about, is hitting spec. So as long as you're hitting spec, you're good.
You ever monitor the 2.0 down mix?
I do. Yes. Yeah. So what I like to do is, once I have my 5.1 mix, I use a program, like I don't, for my 5.1 mix to stereo, I actually use a program called Penteo. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And because their algorithm has been flawless as far as taking the 5.1 spec and matching the 2.0 spec, so that things match up exactly how you want them to, and nothing gets lost. So that, because I know sometimes like there'll be like phase issues and other things that can be weird, but with this program, it kind of just eliminates that. So just for safety and speed, that's what I use.
Yeah,
So,
I guess that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Because there's so many technical considerations. It's nice to have a tool that's just going to sort it out for you, so you can stay creative, right? Not have to think about that stuff too much.
Like I want to mix and I want to edit. I don't want to troubleshoot. So like that's
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being on today. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing, Jonny, as well. Mike, thank you so much as well. I had a last question. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start off in Atmos? You know, they've heard about it. You know, they've maybe finishing college or university, and they're like, you know, I want to get into Atmos. What advice do you give them?
Just jump into it. Get a pair of headphones. Start with the binaural. Just get yourself acquainted with that, and then, you know, graduate from headphones to a multi-speaker setup. But, you know, it's easier now, because before you needed another program, another license, etc. Now the integrated renderer inside of Pro Tools, it's already there. So that aspect alone makes it the entry point easier. It's already built in. It's kind of integrated right there. Just, you know, throw it in binaural mode, grab some headphones, and just start messing around with the panning and placement of your mix. I think just, you know, just experiment, and it's easier now than it was before.
Yeah, exactly that. I would say exactly what Mike said. Because because I remember when I started, like I had to get the external renderer, and then dealing with the licenses from that, and then finding out that like the renderer I had wasn't the exact one that I needed. What is the suite? There was like a suite that was a little different. So to do the things that I actually needed to do, it was like, oh, I gotta buy this thing again. And then and also I was running Dante at the time, so like there was other things on top of that just like was a headache. So now that you have everything built in and it's just ready to go, it's like, yeah, all you gotta do is just grab some headphones, throw it in binaural, and you're off to the races.
The tools that we're talking about are all in Pro Tools Studio and Pro Tools Ultimate. All built in for both of those versions of Pro Tools.
Convinced me to have a go as well, actually.
It's just fun, isn't it? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for watching. Mike, where can people find you, and where can people maybe ask you questions or stuff?
Yeah, you just find me anywhere online, social media. I'm out there. Just Google my name, I'll come up.
Perfect. And Jonny, yourself?
Pretty much the same thing. You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active there. It's Ill Sounds LLC. That's ILLSOUNDS LLC. And so there, that's pretty much where I'm at. In LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn is under my government name, which is Jonathan Strickland, even though my friends call me Jonny. So, but yeah, so those are the two places I'm at, is LinkedIn and Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for watching. This is a great episode, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.